Before we bring Jamie Caldwell on, we're going to visit a little bit with our viewers about some of the things we got going on at Fishing the Midwest TV and kind of give you an up-to-date summary of a fishing pattern that we're on right now that we are exploiting and having really good success with. It's a largemouth bass fishing pattern. I live in Elbow Lake, Minnesota, so I'm not too far from the Alexandria area, and it's a pattern that's going pretty good right now on several of the lakes in my area, and one that we've actually done a couple TV segments on. And what we're doing is we are fishing heavy cover now, the flats, the mid-depth flats, those flats that, those large flats that come out from shore, slowly taper before dropping off quickly, flats from maybe 8 to 15, 16 foot deep, and then they tumble into deeper water. Those flats have a bunch of weed growth on them right now. That weed growth is kind of peaking, and what we're doing is we're actually fishing up on top of the flats. A lot of people, and us included at Fishing the Midwest, we talk about fishing the deep weed edge, that outside edge, and there's a variety of fish species that roam those edges right now, but the bigger bass, particularly on these hot, sunny, calm days, we've had a bunch of them lately. Some of those bigger largemouth are actually up on those flats. They're finding the heaviest weed growth that they can find, and they're tucking into it really deeply. And actually what we're targeting is we're targeting coontail, heavy clumps of coontail up on those flats, and we're doing a couple things. We're using a big jig. I'm actually flipping on a short line or short pitches with a 3/4 ounce hack attack jig. We're actually tipping that hack attack jig with a rage craw and making a short pitch and letting it penetrate into those heavy clumps of coontail. And when we do that, you get into the right clump of coontail, and you can get bit maybe 2 or 3 quick pitches in a row. And lots of times they're, big fish, 2.5 to 4 pound fish or even bigger, are getting into those coontail clumps right now. So it's been a lot of fun to do that. It's short line fishing and it's fast action fishing. And one of the things that we're trying to do is we're matching the hatch a little bit. We're using a couple of the lakes that we're fishing on have really good crayfish populations, and so the Bama craw color with a similarly colored rage craw pitched into those clumps is producing fish really well right now. Another thing that we're doing when the cover's a little more sparse, maybe we're out a little deeper, a little closer to the deeper weed line, we might make a little longer pitches or casts, and we're using the Hack Attack fluoro jig, which is a jig that is a little more compact. The fluoro jig has a bit smaller hook. It's got a little less skirt to it, so it's a little more compact, and it really works great in clear water lakes. So there's a couple lakes that have really good zebra mussel populations that I fish, and it seems like that fluoro jig works outstanding in those, what I call those zebra mussel lakes in that clear water. A little more compact presentation, a little smaller hook, like I said, a little smaller skirt. So that half ounce has worked well there, and we actually, like I said, just did a TV segment on that recently as well. So that's a pattern that we're exploiting. Another thing that I want to mention along with that is we've had a chance now to sample for about 3 weeks the new Team Lou Signature Series rods. These rods were designed by Mark Zona, Kevin Van Dam, Greg Hackney, Andy Montgomery, and Mark Rose all had some rods. It's an 18-rod feature, or 18-rod series. There's spinning models, there's bait casting models, and there's basically a model designed for every kind of bass fishing technique that you're going to use. And I've been using them extensively, exclusively now for about the last 3 weeks, and actually absolutely love them. Luz has done a great job. They've zeroed in those actions for those techniques. They're the right actions. These rods are lightweight, they're super sensitive, and they look good really well, and they're going to be under $200, and those rods are going to be out here later this fall. That's the Team Lou Signature Series. That's a rod and reel combo that you're really going to want to check out if you're a bass head. The other thing that I'd like to mention is we get asked a question. In fact, I got asked this question a couple times the other day at the boat access, people wondering in these clear waters, what kind of lines are you fishing? Are you still using braided line? Are you still, what are you using? And we've actually gone, even with our big jig fishing, where we used to use some braids. When we're in clear water, we're sticking to the fluorocarbons now, because the fluorocarbons have near zero invisibility. They're also pretty low stretch, not as low stretch obviously as a braid, but we really like the near zero invisibility. And the other thing that I really like is when we go to making those short pitches, like I talked about, when we're in those really dense weed clumps. If you make a long pitch, what actually ends up happening is your line gets caught on or lays across some of the weeds, and that jig might not get to the bottom. So that's why we like that little short pitch or even a flip, and let that jig settle in. And what I found is when you use a fluorocarbon line that's got a little stretch to it, you actually have a better chance of staying hooked up to that fish, because sometimes on braid on a short line with a hot fish, you get a 3 or 4 pound largemouth thrashing around, and he's only got 15 or 20 feet of line, and it's braid and no stretch. They can rip a hole in their mouths pretty quickly, and that hook falls out. So that fluoro gives us a little stretch, a little shock absorption. So we've been using a lot of 20 pound tour grade fluorocarbon line for that as well. So that's a pattern. Like I said, we get asked often, we get emails, what are you guys doing as far as, what's the pattern you're on right now? What are you fishing? What are you filming? That jig pattern for largemouth is one that this time of the year I absolutely love. And the cool thing is, a lot of people think, to get bit during the heat of summer here in the Midwest, you got to fish, early or late in the day. No, this is a pattern that those fish actually suck in tighter to that heavy weed growth during the middle of the day. I love 85-degree day that's sunny, bright, no wind. That's ideal for this pattern. You get in on those coontail clumps and you flip and pitch those big jigs, and she's game on, and the battle is on.